This video is looking at the statistics around the women who are in prison in Queensland. In Queensland, only 1 in 12 prisoners are women, so 8.3% of the prison population in 2017 were women. 60% of the women were first-time offenders, which compares to actually only 2% of male prisoners. Women are more likely to be sent to jail for earlier offences. Part of that is they sometimes don't have the capacity to meet fines and other alternative orders to imprisonment. And the other thing is, for some types of offence, even though people claim women get lower penalties, offences where women are cast as unusual, unnatural or dangerous, as you'll see in one of the readings, do lead to longer sentences for women and harsher sentences, including more likelihood of going to jail. The other thing is that there is less recidivism amongst women, and fewer women are repeat offenders generally, whereas a lot of men who've been to jail unfortunately do offend again. There are only 3 women's prisons in Queensland, 2 down in southeast Queensland and 1 in North Queensland, that's near Townsville. That compares to 9 prisons for men. There are 5 men's prisons in southeast Queensland with a wider range of levels of security, from maximum security to minimum security. There are 2 in central Queensland, 1 in North Queensland, which is in Townsville, and 1 in far North Queensland. So they cover a broader range of the areas in the state. And why does that make a difference? Because that affects the ability of family members, especially children, to be able to actually visit with the prisoners. And this is actually a real issue for women who have children who are in prison. And so who are the women in prison demographically? Unfortunately, a lot of the women who are in prison have sad histories of their own. 73% have previously been admitted to psychiatric or mental health units, which is obviously way above the general population. 39% of women who are in prison have attempted suicide. Over a third of women in Queensland prisons are Indigenous, which is way above the demographic percentages for Indigenous women versus non-Indigenous women in Queensland. Indigenous people are well under 5%. In North Queensland, in the Townsville prison, 80% of the inmates in the women's prison are Aboriginal women. Excuse me. 85% of women who are in prison are primary carers. That means they are the parent who's primarily responsible for their children. Over 50% of the women who are in prison themselves were on child protection orders as children. That means they come from families who were so clearly abusive that they were reported to the authorities and there were child protection orders made. 90% of the Aboriginal women in prison and 82% of the non-Aboriginal women in prison have been sexually abused at some point in their lives, which is somewhat higher than the general population. More than 85% of women in prison have experienced childhood sexual abuse. So you can see that when you average out the 90 and the 82% to some degree, almost all of those women have actually experienced childhood sexual abuse, as well as some having also experienced adult sexual abuse. 98% of the women in prison have experienced violence as an adult.